If you want flexible, strong hips that can do things like this, hang out in the bottom of a squat, or maybe even front bend, fold forward, or be able to stand on one foot, or jump and have good balance, well, guess what? I'm gonna show you one movement that you need to practice, ideally every day, that's gonna give you more flexibility and more stability and strength in your hips. So follow along, okay? Okay, the movement that you're gonna work towards is called the one-leg drinking bird. It looks like this. You're gonna stand on one foot, hands on hips. The goal is to come all the way down until your body's parallel with the ground, stretching that hamstring, and then come all the way up to the top position under control without falling down. Now, for most people, this movement is way too difficult, and that's understandable. What you need is a progression taking you from a much simpler variation all the way up to this variation, which is exactly what we're gonna go through in this video. Now, why this movement is so important is because when we hinge through the hips and extend the hips, where our body is perfectly balanced, meaning we're not twisting and bending the ways that we're not supposed to, and we're doing it on one foot, we're having to create flexibility and stability in all the planes of motion through our hip musculature. What I mean by that is this: most people when they work out, they just move front to back. They do squats, they do deadlifts, they're moving front to back. Sometimes we do things that move us side to side in this lateral plane. And very rarely do we do things that require stability in a rotational plane, okay? But when we stand on one foot and we hinge to the hips, we're doing all three planes of motion, and we're practicing that on just one leg, strengthening the hip's ability to have strength, flexibility, balance, and coordination all at the same time. So this move is my absolute favorite for hip flexibility and hip stability. But let's start you out with a beginner variation right now, then we'll go to an intermediate, and then I'll finally show you how to do the drinking bird with perfect form. Okay, this first variation is called a staggered stance drinking bird. So what you're gonna do is start with your feet in a staggered stance. So they're gonna be right underneath your hips, toes facing forward, but your big toe is gonna be at your back heel. From there, you're gonna do a soft bend through both knees, and the most important part here is as we put our hands on our hips, I want you to find your hip bones, and when you move forward and backward, try to make sure that your hips aren't rotating from side to side. This is what's gonna really strengthen the muscles inside the hips, the hip rotators that protect the lower back and make the hips really strong and resilient, okay? So from here, soft bend to the knees, weight goes into the heels. We're gonna bow forward, keeping our back flat, and you're gonna come as far forward as you can until you feel your hamstrings start to stretch, okay? At that point, what's gonna happen is if you try to go further, you're gonna start rounding your back. That's not what we wanna do. We wanna make sure that the spine from the tailbone to the top of the head stays one piece while we practice this movement, okay? So again, hinging through the hips, weight is gonna go primarily on the front foot, but in the heels with a soft knee bend. And then as you stand up, try to squeeze your glutes and squeeze your core as you stand up. Now, a tip for you. If you're in this position and you're trying to squeeze your glutes and all you feel is maybe your lower back or your hamstrings pulling you to the upright position, imagine this. Imagine with your feet, you're turning your feet to the outside. So they're not gonna move, but try to think about twisting the feet to the outside like this. When we twist the feet to the outside like this, we're externally rotating our thigh muscles, which is going to fire those glute muscles. So again, hands on the hips, weight on the heels, soft bend of the knees, most of the weight on the front foot, hinge to the hips, flat back. Now we're down here. Imagine turning your feet to the outside, feel those glute muscles squeezing. Cool, huh? Feels good when you actually fire those glute muscles. Come to the top position, and this is the movement. That's all we're gonna do is practice this movement. Inhaling as we go down, trying to get a little bit deeper on each repetition. Exhaling as we go up, really focusing on those glute muscles and focusing on keeping the back nice and flat. Now what you can do for this movement is every single day when you wake up, stand up from bed, set a timer, and do 1 minute with your left foot forward, and then 1 minute with your right foot forward. Now, after you've practiced this for a few weeks and you start to feel comfortable doing this movement, then you can move on to the intermediate variation that I'll show you next. Okay, for the intermediate version, the setup is gonna be the same as what we just went over, only we're gonna start working on creating that balance on one leg. So it's a really good idea as you practice this variation to have a wall next to you for support or a chair next to you for support, something that you can use your hands for support to practice this motion, okay? So same thing, we're gonna start in this position right here with the hands on the hips. Now what we're gonna do is this. We're going to extend the hips fully, come up on this back toe right here, and see if we can lift that knee up into a standing tall position. From there, as we bring that foot back, we're gonna try to hinge to the hips, and you can use your toe for support back here, tapping it, floating it above the ground, coming forward through the hips like we did with the staggered squat drinking bird, making sure the hips face the ground. We're not opening the hips like this, okay? That's gonna hurt your back and make this a useless movement. And then from there, kind of walking the toe up slowly and coming to that standing position. Now again, you can use a chair or wall for support, and if you do, you might be able to barely use that back foot for support and use your hands for support a little more as you practice this motion. Now this motion is helping you develop the balance and coordination you need to be able to do the single leg drinking bird. So just like the first variation, you're gonna practice this slow and controlled, really focusing on this top position here and really focusing on keeping the hips facing the ground as you come into this extended bent position right here, and also keeping that back flat just like before. Now, just like before, you're gonna practice this 1 minute on the left, 1 minute on the right, first thing when you get out of bed in the morning. What you'll feel is stretching your hamstrings, activating your glutes, activating your core, and generally just overall creating more coordination, balance, strength, and flexibility through your hip structures. Now, if you're able to do this movement without support, where you're just tapping your toe in the back, not tapping your toe, and coming to the tall position, and then repeating that process, then you can move on to the last variation, the single leg drinking bird, which I'll show you now. Okay, for this final variation, I'll show you how to do it with perfect form and some things that you want to pay close attention to, okay? So once you've gone through the beginner and intermediate variations, find your stance, put your foot on the ground, spread your toes, grip the ground with your toes. We want to have active feet when we're practicing our balance. From there, hands go on the hips, and we want to make sure that the hips are facing the ground the entire time. No rotating as we do this movement so that we avoid hurting our hip or our lower back. Now this time we're going to start with the knee up like this, and what we're going to do is push the heel back behind us, use our hands on our hips to make sure that they're facing the ground, and slowly come forward, trying to get as far forward as you can. That might just be 45 degrees. The goal would be eventually to get to about a 90-degree position where your whole body is parallel to the ground. Now try to not fall over and need this back foot for support, but it's okay if you do. Stand up tall, extend the knee, and the goal is to move between these positions, slow and controlled, and you should feel wobbles on your feet. Your whole lower body should be working as we go from position to position. Now, the number one thing you want to avoid doing in this is you want to avoid either rounding your back as you go forward like this, that's going to end up putting pressure on your spine, or opening your hips to the outside like this. So as you come down, opening your hips to the outside, this is a real common one, which basically puts our body into a compromised position. The hips stay parallel to the ground the whole time, the back stays nice and flat the entire time. Now, just like the other movements, you can use a chair for support when you're first starting out on this, but try to get to the point where you can do this without using any sort of support other than having your foot planted on the ground for an entire minute. So just like the other variations, wake up in the morning and start practicing the one leg drinking bird for 1 minute on the left and 1 minute on the right. And when you're consistent with this and you're doing it every single day, remember this only takes 2 minutes, you're gonna develop so much strength, flexibility, balance, coordination, stability, mobility, all that good stuff in your hips that is gonna make your body feel amazing. So make sure to come back to this video often, practice this, and work your way towards that one-legged drinking bird if you wanna have amazing feeling hips. Hey, before you go, if this wasn't enough variations to show you how to do a drinking bird with good form, taking you from that first beginner variation to that full variation of the drinking bird, well then guess what? At WeShape, we focus on teaching people movements in a step-by-step fashion, just like you learned today, to help you feel better in your body. In our program, we have more than 10 different levels associated with the drinking bird, meaning if you can't even do the beginner variation, we've got a variation for you that you can do in bed while lying down. And from there, we'll gradually show you slightly different variations all the way up to the one-legged drinking bird to help you build that strength, flexibility, balance, and coordination in your hips that's gonna make you feel amazing. And we don't just do that on the drinking bird. We do that with dozens of other movements that will help your body feel amazing, giving you the strength, flexibility, balance, and coordination that will make your body feel amazing doing anything in your daily life. So, if you want to try a WeShape workout out where we teach you how to do this step by step, click the link below, take our free quiz, and I'll see you soon for your first workout with us.